Welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 6. I've been doing a rewatch of the entire Next Gen series, and I will link in the description box seasons. I did a video for seasons 1 and 2, and then I started doing individual seasons 3, 4, and 5. This will be 6, and I've already kind of kicked into season 7, so hopefully I'll be wrapping up Next Gen, and then either Voyager or Enterprise. I'm not sure which. I've done a Voyager rewatch in the past, but I've never done a second viewing of Enterprise, which I like. It's probably, it's my least favorite of the, kind of golden era Star Trek shows, but I was surprised at how much I did like it when I watched it. And I watched the full 4 seasons, all the shows. I thought season 3 was amazing. Season 4, a little bit of a fall off, but it was Star Trek. When you watch the new shows, it made me realize, season 4. I mean, Enterprise was Star Trek, and it still had the stuff about Star Trek that I love was still present in season 4. That god awful theme song, though, oof, that was tough to bear. Anyway, let's get to season 6. So, some overview thoughts of season 6. Definitely a quality escalation in the number of episodes that I liked from season 5. And it made me think that, you can kind of categorize Next Gen quality levels. Like season 1 and 2 are not nearly as bad as everyone will have you say. People hack on the first 2 seasons, and I don't understand why. They're fine. They have there's a lot of kind of forgettable episodes, but there's a lot of good episodes. Those first 2 seasons, it's decent Trek. I would say it's kind of B tier Star Trek, with an occasional A tier episode. By no means bad. Not as bad as what I consider the worst season of Star Trek, which is the first season of Deep Space Nine, which I feel like is egregiously bad and boring. But from then on, it's all wonderful stuff. But that first season, I would put that below almost anything else. So anyway, I think season 1 and 2, there's a similar quality level. And then 3, 4, and 5, things come up a little bit. To me, it's still, you're getting middling episodes, you're getting throwaway episodes, you're getting goofy episodes, but you're also getting good episodes, and you get some very memorable ones, and there are some, top 10 episodes in those years for sure. So overall, it's like an improvement. 3, 4, and 5, pretty much. I don't know that I could say one season better than the next in those 3, but definitely an uptick in just episodes that are better. They're focused on character. When they're not specifically character focused, the stories are generally better, but there's still a lot of clunkers in those seasons as well. But season 6, boom, up another level. I mean, I liked 18 of the 26 episodes, which is probably a new record in terms of how many episodes I really liked. So, and you can just tell that the episodes were more entertaining as a whole. The highs, again, I think there have been highs in every season that's come before. So the highs were kind of, when it did hit highs, the highs in the other seasons was very similar. But there were more of them, I thought. So there was that. What was nice is, kind of odd actually. So Troy, I think some seasons, I think seasons 4 and 5, I think a little less 5, but 4, where Troy just dropped off the map. She was just like an almost supporting character. No real stories about her. I don't know, lots of 4 and 5, they kind of lost her. Well, in 6, she's back. But what's interesting is that she's back in a way that's not really about her in terms of her being a Betazoid. So, she's a captain on, she's a Romulan secret agent. She commands an away team. She has to revisit her old relationship with William Riker when they find Thomas, his twin. So it's they kind of plug her into stories where she has more screen time and better dialogue, but she's not using a lot of the Beta Z. I mean, I guess they burnt out on it, where the writers were, she must have been overjoyed, where the writers were like, all right, no more cleavage. She's wearing pants now, uniforms up to her neck, and let's throw her into some situations where she gets to kick ass. So it's an odd shift for her. It's nice to see her in more, but Troy leads with her vulnerability, and she leads with her counselor persona. And I think it's it was a weird kind of thing of guys writing for girls and having the women lead like a man rather than a woman, it's kind of, I don't know, it may sound sexist, but there's this thing of you know, when men write women and they want them to be strong characters, like they write them with kind of male characteristics, because there are certain things as female and male characteristics for sure, and where, like, you know, I think it's possible for women to do the same things as men, like lead and you know, brain power. It's all equal, but to do it in a different way, where women are more, they're a little more diplomatic, they're a little more aware of their emotions, they're a little smarter when it comes to interpersonal relationships and stuff. Where guys are like, you know, like, let's kick ass and take names, and it's machismo. And so in a weird way, they make Troy more like a kick-ass heroine, but it's oddly uncharacteristic of her in some ways. I don't know, I'm conflicted. It's really weird. I mean, I kind of like Troy, strangely enough. But yeah, so it's kind of an odd season for her. Lots of Worf and Klingon lore, and Worf always gets good screen time, so that's a no-brainer. Other than parts of Descent, Data, not too many Data episodes that I can kind of remember. They don't do too much with him, although they do enough with him in the last, you know, the cliffhanger season ender, that's a lot. But I think in a weird way, Data takes half a step back, Troy steps half a step forward. It's kind of weird. Picard, of course, is featured in a bunch of episodes, and he's great. And O'Brien is gone. I think now is when Deep Space Nine started, season 5, 6. So I think he's in a couple of episodes, and then he's history. And he went to be a full cast member in DS9. So that's kind of the overview. So I just want to run down the episodes that I liked. I will mention Time's Arrow. It's part 2, obviously. In terms of the cliffhangers, like, probably my least favorite cliffhanger episode. They go back in time to you know, the turn of the 20th century, and then maybe with Mark Twain, and aliens are, you know, stealing humans and using them for energy. The clever idea is that, you know, they lose Data's head, and they have to take the head that was found, you know, back in that time period. So like they do this kind of time loop where Data gets to be reconnected, but they have to use the old head that they found. So that was kind of neat. But the rest of it I thought was kind of forgettable. Relics was great. Scotty was back. I mean, what a casting coup that was to get him back. You know, it's kind of a one-off episode, and he kind of goes off into the sunset by himself. It's kind of a strange episode for Scotty, but it's good. Him and LaForge, you know, in terms of, they deal with the fact that he's out of touch, and that he wants to kind of reassert his authority in the engine room and being an engineer and all that. So very entertaining. Then Schisms was another episode where it's basically a take on, you know, alien abduction done in the Star Trek way. So, you know, they're slowly figuring out, they're seeing medical evidence that, like, their limbs have been severed and reattached and bones have been cut in half, and they have to figure out, you know, how to survive kind of the trip to wherever these aliens are taking them, whatever dimension, to figure it out. So it's a cool episode. It takes them a while for them to kind of get it, but I really enjoyed it. True Q was great. I think it was the only Q episode of this season. There's usually 2, so it's strange. There's only one of them. I think, from what I can remember. But it's wonderful. They find this woman comes aboard the Enterprise. She's kind of a doctor in training, doctor scientist, and then it turns out she was born of Q parents. So these 2 members of the Q continuum gave birth to her, and she doesn't even know she's Q. She thinks she's human, and we come to find out that the Q parents that, you know, birthed her were killed by the Q continuum for, like, doing that. They weren't supposed to do that. So what's wonderful is that, you know, she is in this position of, like, Q is like, I'm the only one who can kind of show her who she is. And of course, you know, Q is such a douche that Picard is sort of like, you know, absolutely not. But, you know, she runs into these wonderful conundrums. She has this conversation with Beverly Crusher where she's like, you know, Beverly, if you had the power to resurrect your husband again, would you do it? Because this woman lost her parents, you know, a long time ago. And Beverly is like, I couldn't tell you if I could or not until that choice was actually faced with me. Like, it was great. So, a really good episode, and it was kind of a thorny subject, and it ends, I think, honestly, how it kind of should end. So that was good. Then there was an episode called The Quality of Life, where the scientist creates these kind of atomic drones called exocons that are able to do all these wonderful repairs, and they're kind of very smart. And then at some point, Data realizes that they've gained sentience, and he disobeys Picard's orders, puts the ship in danger, risks his career to protect them because he realized that this is a form of life, a new form of life. So really cool, good Data episode. Enjoyed it. Definitely played with the classic Trek themes of, first contact and interfering with life and what that means for an exploratory group. So I really enjoyed that. Chains of Command was awesome. The redoubtable Ronnie Cox of many 90s movies, Total Recall, RoboCop fame, plays yet another heavy. They have to go to the Cardassian Bajoran border, and Picard and, I think it's Picard and two others have to do this secret mission. And so this Captain Jellicoe takes over the Enterprise, and the whole time it's him and Riker clashing, and he doesn't think much of Riker. Riker doesn't think much of him. He's kind of a dick as a commander. And Cox is great. Like, it really goes well. It's a two-parter, and one of the better episodes of the season. Like, really good stuff. The Picard mission turns out that the whole thing's a fake in order to be captured, and then you've got this wonderful two-hander between David Warner and Patrick Stewart as Picard is captured. And it's the whole thing about how many lights do you see? I see 4 lights. There are 5 lights. How many lights do you see? So there's this whole interrogation sequence that's going on right there, which is just, two powerhouse English actors. And thank God, blessed with a great script, makes it like a highlight of the entire Next Gen series. Those two guys, and Picard, how kind of Picard slowly wears down the David Warner Cardassian, whose name I can't remember, Gull something. And at the end, there's a wonderful ending where Picard tells Beverly that he actually saw 5 lights, but he wouldn't say it, you know what I mean? So it was just one of the best episodes, probably the best one of the season, although not my favorite. Ship in a Bottle was great because Moriarty returns. And it's a wonderful like Matrix kind of thing where, Moriarty can kind of tricks the Enterprise crew into thinking that he's left the holodeck, and then they have to kind of trick Moriarty into giving up control by tricking him into thinking he's left it. Just wonderful layers, and like I truly forgot about the episode, and so when one of the twists happened, I was so like, oh shit! I was surprised. Most of the time when you watch Star Trek, you kind of know what the next beats of the episode are, just because, it's 80s, 90s TV. It's not ever super surprising, but you watch it because you love the show and the concept. But this was one of the first times where I was like, oh man, like it really kind of surprised me. It was delightful. Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. Face of the Enemy was the weird Troy's, abducted, surgically altered to pass for Romulan, and then she has to pose as a Romulan, Tal Shiar member. The harshest and cruelest Romulans on the planet, and it's just a weird. I'm sure the writers were sort of like, what if Troy had to be like really horrible and really make believe she was bad? And Marina Sirtis does great. It's kind of an odd episode, and I like it because you don't really know what's going on for a while, until finally. She buttonholes this second in command that she realizes has been with her the whole time, and you find out what's happening. But, and you don't quite believe, I don't think I really ever believed, the woman who's in charge of the Romulan ship, who's terrific, you never quite believe that she would fall for Troy's BS. So, as much, to me, it was like, it's a flawed concept where, like, Marina Sirtis, it's just, there's no way she's ever throwing up any kind of a stern front where you're going to believe she could be a Tal Shiar member. So, like, it was just that level of unbelievability. But the plot was fun to figure out actually what was going on and who's doing what and how it gets resolved. So, I enjoyed it. And then probably my favorite Next Generation episode of the entire show, which is Tapestry, which is just a beautiful episode where you start out with Picard on an operating table, and Beverly can't save his life because his artificial heart took a blast. And so he dies, and he's in white space with Q. And Q basically, gets to the point where we turn out like what happened. He has an artificial heart because of something he did when he was a young Starfleet officer just out of the academy. And so he was like, I was stupid, and if I wouldn't have done what I did back then, I wouldn't have had this artificial heart and I would have lived. So Q is like, all right, I'll take you back there. And Picard, of course, is like, you're going to change history. I won't do it. And he's like, I promise you that nothing you do, even if you change things, that nothing you do will alter this timeline, So we kind of have to do that so we get the story going. And it's this wonderful meditation on if you were an older, wiser adult, going back, being a youth, and making all the different choices that you would make, playing it safe, using understanding and wisdom, and how it would just mess up your life. And then once he avoids the fight, he alienates all his friends, he avoids the fight, and then they flash forward to the moment when he died on the Enterprise and the new timeline that was created because of it. He's become this like second banana, midshipman who works in engineering. He does research and stellar cartography. And there are these wonderful conversations he has with Riker and Troy, where he's like, I think I could be commander. And they like tell him about what his career, about they don't see it. And it's like, and then he has this confrontation with Q. Q's like, well, I gave you what you wanted. And he's like, I would rather die. I would rather die on the table and live the life that I lived than go on being the man that I was. And before that, Q has this incredible speech. I should have had a clip of it, but I'd probably get copyright slammed. But where Q sort of like, you never did this, and you never did the Stargazer, and you never went down to this, and you never saved this planet, and you never got that, blah, 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 blah. You always took the safe route. You never were, you never stood out to anyone. And as he's slowly walking towards Picard and telling him all the things he never did, and he gets to the end, and you became this no one who never did anything in his life. And it's like, what a gut punch to anyone in midlife who looks back and kind of thinks like, wow, what are some of the things that I didn't do? Like, it's a hell of an episode. I think it's Ron Moore too, who's one of the best writers on Next Gen. So just a hell of an episode. Every time I watch it, I tear up a little bit. It's a powerhouse, and Stewart nails it. So then there's Birthright, which was an amazing episode, kind of layered in a way. So Worf finds this colony of kind of pacifists, Romulans, and Klingons, and at first he's trying to kind of get the Klingons to wake up to their martial, prowess and martial spirit. And I remember at the beginning, the first part of that, I was sort of like, Worf's like a Nazi, man. Like, what is he, these two beings have learned to live in peace. And he's going in there now, stirring them up with songs and telling them mythology, which is kind of what Hitler did. The Nazis kind of brought all this mythology about who the Aryans were. And so part of it, I was like, man, this is like kind of a fascist episode. But by the end, it was complicated because in a way, the price they were paying to live in peace was that they were unaware of their heritage. They were unaware of who they were. They were unaware of all these things that were deeply rooted in their being and in their DNA and in who they were. It's one thing to know, I guess the episode was trying to say, it's one thing to kind of know your history and know who you are and choose a different path in full knowledge. But to have that path imposed upon you without knowledge of your, of the full knowledge of what you came from and who you are and all that, it's still a tricky thing. It's sort of like, but maybe who you are is just who you decide to be, and what these children, these Klingon children that were brought up not knowing the Klingon way were like, they were brought up to prize, they played games, right? They were brought up to kind of prize peace and prize harmony. So to me, it's not an easy episode to fall back on. Like, did Worf do the right thing? And eventually, half the colony leaves with him because they get carried away. And yeah, they're going to go back to the Klingon Empire, and like half of them will probably get killed. And is that, what did he really do? So it was really a thorny episode. I gotta give, as the later seasons of Next Gen were happening, there were more thorny questions that were being risen. They weren't these panacea, perfect, Starfleet's perfect kind of things. The kind of precursor to Deep Space Nine was starting to pop up in certain episodes. There's the episode where the warp drive is destroying the fabric of space, which is, I think, in season 7. So they were starting to punch through with some heavier stuff, which Deep Space Nine obviously would capitalize on. So then Starship Mine, which is great. It's basically Die Hard. It's Star Trek's Die Hard, where, they're the one where they have to all leave the ship because they have to do this barium scan to kind of kill these organisms that I guess have lived on the ship. It's almost like taking the barnacles off of a ship after the ship's been at sea for years. You have to dry dock it and clear the barnacles off. This was kind of the Trek version. And then Picard goes back to get something on the ship, and then everything deactivates, and then he finds out there's a group of people on it who want to steal it. Or steal trilithium, which the ship makes as a waste product. And so there's the whole thing where he's got to kind of be an action hero, which kind of precludes a little bit First Contact, which is kind of when Picard became, John McClane. But good episode, really good episode. And part of this episode was very funny, where the crew was going to, where this, barium, I don't know if it was barium, something scan was going to be done. When they all are off the ship, they go to this kind of space dock where this guy hosts them, the Starfleet officer hosts them, and he's kind of famous for, boring the pants off of people with small talk. So there's part of the comedic part of the episode is Data learning small talk. And so first, it's hysterical, Data learning it, first of all. And then at some point, they put Data and this guy Hutchinson together, and the two of them they're at it for like hours, just doing small talk, and it's very funny. Like it was a comedic gem in an episode that was pretty hardcore and where Picard almost died, frankly, but really good. Then an episode called Lessons, where Picard falls in love, which doesn't happen that often, but he meets a woman who he sees a passionate kind of quasi-scientist, as someone who's interested in music, and it's very sweet. She's a pianist, and he has his flute, and they kind of come together by playing music together, and then it springs up this wonderful relationship. And then Picard is talking to Troy about I don't know how to do this, with the crew. It's very sweet. And then they do it right, they do it real, where stuff happens on the ship, and he has to order this woman into danger. And other crew, when she asks for certain things, for Riker, Riker feels kind of uncomfortable, okay, this is the captain's girlfriend, what am I going to do here? So they deal with some real ramifications of what that might be like, which I liked. And then it ends on a kind of sad note, which kind of it had to end on. So it was good. The chase was interesting. It was kind of an archaeology chase across the galaxy. One of Picard's old professors comes to visit him and wants him to leave the Enterprise and follow him on this quest to, find this monumental secret of the galaxy. The guy dies, so Picard, defies Starfleet orders, and he picks up the chase, and it's a cool idea. It ends up being finding the answer to how life began in the galaxy, which is kind of an interesting thing, where they wind up meeting Romulans and Klingons. So the three big races in that Alpha Quadrant are told kind of this is how life began, and there's some of me and all of you and all that. So it was nice. It was very watchable, if perfunctory kind of in a way. Then Rightful Heir is the apparent return of Kahless. Worf is having a crisis of faith. He goes to this planet where he does vision quests, and then all of a sudden Kahless appears. And there's this whole meditation on what would it be like if a long-awaited religious leader would have returned. It turns out he was a clone created by the priests, but a clone created out of all of the memories and all of the information and the DNA they had of the real Kahless. So in a sense, it is Kahless. It's just not the Kahless. Then there's all this political discussion about, can we use this person as a figurehead? Gowron gets involved, and he wants no part of it. And Worf comes up with this very elegant solution that I don't remember if they continue to deal with it in Deep Space Nine, but very cool. Just, the notion of what is faith, and what would a spiritual leader need to be that spiritual leader? Wouldn't faith make it so, in a sense. Wouldn't your faith that it is, even knowing that this person is maybe not the exact copy, but embodies everything that figure stood for and is, would that be enough? And so just, very interesting meditation on that subject. Second Chances, we are introduced to Thomas Riker, who is a basically an identical, creation, a transporter malfunction that happened on this planet. 8 years go by, Enterprise comes back, and they discover, that Will Riker has basically a clone. Not even a clone, it's just another version of him, which was created at the moment he beamed off the planet, and part of him beamed back. But also part of him, it was actually a split that created two beings. But there's an 8-year gap of, the one Riker was stuck on the planet by himself for 8 years. But that was around the time when he and Deanna just ended their relationship. So you have this wonderful kind of rekindling of the romance between Thomas Riker and Troy, which is great. They really do it. And like she's like, Will, what do you think? Hey, it's go for it. It's not me. I'm blah, 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 blah. So it's just an interesting thing of like, if they were to continue on and what happens. And then, is he the same person, or would he be, because you find out that after that mission, Riker promised that he was going to go on this other mission. And then after that, him and Troy would be together. But it turned out that he never kept his promise. Decided that he wanted to just continue with his career, and they kind of went their separate ways. So Thomas Riker promises the same thing, and Troy's sort of like, okay, is he the same Riker or is he not? Very clever, really well written. And we meet Thomas Riker again in DS9, where I think he doesn't die. So his fate is kind of unknown, I guess, at the end of the Golden Era Trek series. Then Timescape, which is wonderful. I think it's Troy, Picard, and LaForge come back from a conference, and they see frozen in space a Romulan ship and the Enterprise engaged in this battle, and they're in this part of space where, the actual fabric of space-time has been disrupted. It's a great episode. I mean, really cool, because they kind of have to create these fields around themselves so they can beam onto the two ships to figure out what happened. And so you've got this kind of locked room mystery where they're walking around the ships, and we're seeing certain things that look like Romulans have taken over, but then it didn't quite look like that. Like, it was really well done. I'd forgotten about it. It's just a crackerjack episode, one of the best ones of the series. So yeah, really great. And then they end with Descent, which starts out really well, in that this group of Borg seem to be disconnected from the collective, and they're, kind of against the Federation as well. And they think that maybe Hugh is involved. And so they finally track them down wherever they're supposed to be. And the letdown for me in that it's lore. I think, I just finished watching part 2, where you do see Hugh again. And it's kind of a nice wrap up with Hugh. But I just, lore is I feel like I don't like the lore episodes because he's just such an unremitting bad guy. There's nothing interesting about him. It's really what happens to Data during these episodes. And it is an interesting episode, even part 2. He kind of takes Data over, and Data becomes kind of a carbon copy of Lore. And they have to figure out a way to, break Lore's hold over him and kind of re-engage his ethical programs to get him out of there. So it's good in that way. And there are some wonderful moments in the first part where, Data finally feels emotions for the first time. But unfortunately, what he feels is anger, and he feels pleasure over killing. A really dark thing. I don't think it's ever been that dark on Trek until we get to Suter on Voyager, and what was happening with Tuvok, and those moments of like when he was practicing killing, and all that. There's a couple of episodes on Voyager that are really dark in that wonderful way. But so it started really interesting, and then I think as soon as Lore showed up, I was really bummed because I don't know, it's boring. I mean, thank God Hugh was still there, because I found Hugh, Hugh's individualism being kind of metastasizing into some Borg and disconnecting them from the collective is the more interesting story for me. But, and then it makes sense that, them being confused and not knowing how to deal with life because of it, they turn to someone like Lore who exploits them, right? So it makes sense. But as soon as Lore kind of shows up and starts cackling, I was like, oh, this is going to be boring. This will be Lore just threatening terrible things for a while, and then Data will figure out a way to get the upper hand, and that'll be that. And that's exactly what happened. But anyway, that's my long-winded overview of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 6. I'm plowing through Season 7, so hopefully in a couple of weeks I will have a nice wrap-up to the full series. Really enjoying my rewatch of Next Gen. It's such a solid series. Just great. Just, everything that I remembered. Some of the clunkers were worse than I remember, but some of the better episodes are even better than I remembered. So it's just a treat, and this is something that now I have on Blu-ray. I have the remastered Blu-ray set, and I'll just, I'll rewatch it from years and years to come. It should be wonderful. So anyway, thanks for watching.